quorum. So, okay, thank you very much. So we do have a quorum. So we are going up, and I see Mr. Granum coming on as well. So we do have a quorum. I am calling the meeting to order. The time is now 7:06 p.m. I want to thank everyone for joining us for our Transportation Committee meeting for Brooklyn Community Board 9. So the agenda has already been published. We have a number of items to consider this evening. I've already called the attendance, so I do have we do have a quorum at this time. We are now going to move on to the next item of business, which will be the approval of the minutes for the committee. So did all the committee members receive a copy of the minutes from last month?
Yes,
Okay.
they were sent a copy.
All right. Are there any changes that? Perfect. Jeff, did you receive yours as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Are there any changes that need to be made to the minutes?
I didn't see anything missing.
I was confused by number 3, letter E, Transportation Town Hall. It said centered around the proposed bike lane installation on the Flatbush Avenue, but I
No, that is not accurate. Actually, that should have been about the bus lane.
yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay,
Oh,
so we'll make that
Good
change.
catch.
Yeah, so we'll make that change into the record. So that should be bus lane. You're correct. Okay. Are there any other changes for the minutes? Any other edits? Okay. All right. So with those changes, so do we have common consent on the approval of those minutes with that change? Are there any objections? Okay,
No
hearing none. Okay, hearing none, the minutes stand as approved with the corrections as stated. Okay, we are now going to go on to the next item on the agenda, which will be the application for the co-naming of Crown Street between Troy and Albany Avenues. As I'm going to really butcher this. Is it Samche?
Homche Tamimim Way.
Thank you for saving me. So yes, for the proposed co-naming. So do we have representatives for the applicants this evening?
Yes.
Rabbi Langdon is here.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Langston. So at this time, if you just please tell us a little bit about, about the renaming, about the history, just so we have a little bit of background with respect to that.
First of all, thank you all for your time. Thanks for everything you guys do for the community. I'm not sure that anyone really recognizes that these meetings go on and the work you guys put in behind the scenes. So I can say myself, I didn't even realize the extent of it. So thanks very much for that. Okay, so we have a school here on the corner of Crown and Albany. The building was built 30 years ago. There's literally tens of thousands of students that went through the school. It's a very central place for this neighborhood. A lot of the bar mitzvahs and different events go on here, I'd say every night or something. It's like a real landmark for us. It's like, I know I myself went through the school here. Yaakov may have gone through it as well. My children go through here. So I think now that we have 30 years in the building, we're working on an expansion of the building. We thought with everything that goes on, everyone and the community using this facility so much. We have after school programs every night. We're putting in now a gym to be able to give more of that after school. Actually, primarily the work that we're doing on the building is really to create more of that extracurricular stuff. We're putting in proper gyms and all that, really to be more, instead of just more classrooms, we're living in Brooklyn. We got to do whatever we can to give those kids that ability to get out of those apartments and, get what they need, social, emotional, and so on. So we thought it would be befitting, over the next little bit, if we can get a renaming of the school to represent, like I've put out there, what the school is, the name of the school. And I think for the community itself, it would be like something special. Like, when you go through it, I can say for myself, it's a school that you learn through, and your kids go through it now. And you say, wow, we honored it just by naming the school itself. I think it would be something really, really special. It's something that's been on my mind for a while. Spoke with some people. I know I had a bunch of people sign a petition for it because they were super excited even just to hear the idea. And I spoke with Yaakov, if we can make this happen. And I'm here asking you all to help me make this happen. Let's do this together.
Rabbi Langdon, I think you should also speak for a moment about the history of Tochtemimim, the hundreds of years of history dating back to Eastern Europe, pre-war.
Yeah, so the history of Tom Khmer is that it was actually it's about 120 something years now since, I mean, the exact date, since the school was opened back in Russia, was in a small town called Lubavitch. That's when the school was opened by one of the great rabbis. And over the years that it traveled around as they were moving, out of Russia. And the previous Chabad rabbi, when he came here to America, on the shores of America, it was where was it over here? In literally in Manhattan, I believe it was. It was here in Manhattan. They came from Russia. The first thing he said when he came off the boat is that America is no different. And the first day he said, we're going to establish that school here. So it was the first, project that he took on as soon as he came to America, to make sure that that school continues here in America. So it's moved around. It was at Bedford and Dean. It was in Ocean Parkway. And then they built this building here in the community. In 1989, the Chabad Grand Rabbi said that we should continue to build a community. Everyone should do things to grow. And that's when the idea was to build this building here, to continue just building into the community and giving the opportunity for our children to grow. So that happened about 30 years ago. And here we are, trying to take it to the next level. And I think naming the street will really give us that opportunity to show respect for what it is. I mean, you can pass by here on any night, literally hundreds of people coming in and out. The community uses it, there's a school here, but the amount that the community uses this facility is beyond. I know we have different political events that people come by, senators and mayors, whoever they come by to, meet and greet. You have that going on here. You have families who need to make bar mitzvahs. A lot of people, different, we do blood drives here. As a matter of fact, yesterday there was a large blood drive here. The community uses this facility tremendously. And I think with being used for the community and the school and the history of the school, I thought that would be a special thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, is there anyone else that you have scheduled to speak on behalf of the application, or?
I'd like to add something if possible, as a former student and a longtime board member. I think as Rabbi Langdon, he gave a great overview. I just want to add also, to me, this school also represents how Judaism survived 2 world wars, and we have a long history of persecution, and this school represents the growth of the Jewish community post-war. The first time it was displaced was after the first war, then it was displaced after the second war, and eventually the school is flourishing now in Crown Heights. So the school represents generations of our community dating back hundreds of years. And I think it's Rabbi Langdon, it's a co-naming. So I think it would be befitting if we co-name Crown Streets between Albany and Troy, Tochtemimim Way. I know you have, the board was sent letters of support by both the local state senator and the local assembly member. There are also signatures of support, and a rabbi who has a congregation on the corner also gave a letter of support, and I gave a letter of support. I think that this institution, this 100-year-old institution, this 30-year-old building, hits all the marks for a co-naming of a nonprofit in our city, and it's a perfect opportunity for us to partner with this institution and co-name Crown Streets.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so at this time, we will take questions from members of the committee. Are there any members of the committee who have questions for the applicant about the application? Mr. Greenberg, I see you.
I guess a question for you, Fred, and maybe Dante. What's the precedent? I mean, I know we often co-name streets after people. Do we co-name streets after schools? I mean, I can't think of one in the whole city. That might be there, but like there's no Stuyvesant Street in front of Stuyvesant High School. There's no Midwood Street in front of Midwood High School. There's no NYU Street. So do we do this?
Can I respond, or Fred or Dante, do you want to respond?
Well, I'm looking for like, what's the city policy
The
first?
city, it's in the city policy. If you look in the
No,
application.
I'm
for
sorry,
street
I'm sorry,
names-
sir. I'm not asking you. I'm asking
All right.
the
Right.
community board members.
I do not believe that the co-naming application is out of order, because I think that's one of the things that they do consider. Usually it's significant persons, but significant
Right.
institutions also, I think, might fall under that as well. But that I can definitely get confirmation. But like, for example, I know we've had co-namings for like subway stations, different things of that nature. So like Meg Rivers is co-named on Franklin and on President
Right.
Street. So that is something that is not necessarily inconsistent with co-naming in the city. But I can definitely make sure we go back and get additional information.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's actually in the co-naming procedure. It says a nonprofit or a person. When they have the city council's criteria clearly states nonprofits. And it's also, I think, in the board, potentially, I can send you from Crystal Hudson's document as well. It has nonprofit as a criteria.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And I'll send you, we can send you the documentation. We'll make the ask and we'll send the documentation to the committee. All right. Are there any other questions for the applicant or about the application? Okay, seeing none. All right, so at this time, I'll ask, are we ready for the question? Do I have a motion to move forward and approve the application for consideration by the exec and the board?
Wait, I wanted to say, what was the significance of the school for it to be named as a street name? I'm sorry, I couldn't move fast enough. That's all I'm asking. What's the significance? What is?
Well, it's given the amount of people, it's given, the significance of it in the community. It's been there for a number of years at this point. Definitely have had a lot of people who've been through the school, students. It's been there to the point made by the applicant. It's definitely a hub of community activity as well. So that's the purpose why it's the application is here. That's why they're asking for it, and that's the reason why it's before the committee this evening.
I can also
Oh.
respond. It's 120 years old. It survived 2 wars and relocated here, and it's been here for many years. So it's significant both in the community. I went to that school. I was the first class building, and there are thousands that went, and it's a hub. In addition to its significance today, it represents 120 years of Jewish survival throughout 2 wars and a relocation to New York post World War II. So it's a very
Oh.
significant institution.
Oh, this is just for Jewish people, or this is?
It's for everybody. It's used, the blood drives, everybody comes to the halls are used by, I actually was by several community-wide meetings in the school for bringing communities together in common cause over the years. It's open to anybody to rent the facilities. It's a yeshiva, so there's the attendees are typically Jewish, the students, but the halls and the facilities are used by everybody.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right. So at this time, do we have a motion on the floor?
I'll make the motion to support it.
All right. I see moved by Paco Abraham. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. I can't move fast enough, my fingers are not moving. Okay, that's seconded.
No worries. So moved, and so we have the motion on the floor. It's been moved and properly seconded. Are there any other questions or unreadiness?
Not a board member, but I do have a question.
Sure.
I think it's a wonderful idea that you do have this building, but would you consider also assisting in building those relationships with other races of people so that the hate that's towards you guys can help be eliminated? Is that something you guys would consider doing?
Lang, if you want to respond, I just want to say that it's so beautiful, and I think we should all work together. I'd love to partner with you on both racism and anti-Semitism. I'd love to work with you because it's an issue that both Jews and blacks in America are facing an increase in anti-Semitism and racism, and we've stood together for generations, and we should continue to stand together.
I actually, Yaakov, you couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. I mean, that's what we teach. That's what's important. At the end of the day, like we said, we've been through it together. We live here together, and we have to do whatever we can to continue, you know, spreading the
Okay.
message how anti-Semitism doesn't make a difference to what race you are. We're all from the same, and we all got to treat each other the same and respect each other. And we're open to host any of these type of stuff, which we've done. And you know, like we have the blood drive, it's open for everybody. We do things that everyone together, and I think that's an important point, and we have to continue on that track. I'm proud to say that we're doing whatever we can, always open to hear more input and continue that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. And we will be taking you up on that as well. So we'll have additional conversations in terms of programs we can do. All right. So despite the fact that you're responsible for Rabbi Berman, we won't hold that against you too much. All right. Unless there are any questions, I think we will take the vote now. Well, actually, let me ask this. Is there any, do we have common consent? Is there any objection to approving the recommendation by common consent? Okay, hearing none, the motion on the floor is approved by the committee by unanimous consent. We will forward this to the
Thanks.
executive committee. They'll consider it there, and it'll be forwarded to the full board, we expect by the April meeting.
By the April meeting?
I'm sorry, did I say, no, I'm sorry, this month's meeting.
Well,
this
I want to
month.
say, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. I also forwarded you the criteria from Crystal Hudson's office, which includes nonprofit you can share with the committee. I forwarded it to Dante. Rabbi Langzim, why don't you thank the committee? And
Yes, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for considering it. Thank you for pushing this forward. It's greatly appreciated. It's one of those things that will, we'll all walk by that street one day and say, wow, and I think at the end of the day, it wouldn't have happened without you. So each and every one of you, I want to personally say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Some work that you do. People don't recognize it enough. I don't think people are educated enough to know what you do. Now they got a little inside look at it. I wholeheartedly want to say thank you to each and every you, and to take your time to do what you do for the community is extremely commendable. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck. Good night now. Okay.
Good night.
All right. All right. We are now going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which will be committee updates. We have a number of items that we're going to to follow up on this evening. First, just for the record, I just want to make the note. So we do have committee member Valerie Fleming. She's on as well. So we're adding you to the attendance. So we've got you on it. Okay. All right. So for committee updates, item 4, section A, Flatbush Avenue corridor follow-up. I want to thank everyone who was able to attend the town hall that we conducted on the Flatbush Avenue corridor. I want to say that I was really very pleased in terms of the community turnout. I believe we had between 50 and 60 people who came out and participated, and even more importantly, I think people were very passionate and really expressed their ideas about the corridor. So this is really meant to be an initial conversation, just to kind of get a sense of where people are, what the questions are, what things we needed to do. At this time, if I could ask, I think, Jeff, I know that you were a, well, actually, rather than put the facilitators on the spot, I think we sent out the feedback. Did everyone receive the feedback sheet that we had created?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about it a little bit in terms of what does the committee find in terms of the big issues that we really need to be asking, or the big questions that we need to be considering.
Well, I'll speak for my group. If you had a chance to look over my notes, there were a lot of questions that, since we only had a limited amount of time, I chose to just document and forward to you so that possibly that we could get answers for them that wouldn't solely be my opinion. And I felt that I didn't want to steer the participants in my breakout group in any direction that was limited to just what I thought. And if you looked at those questions, I think that they should definitely go before MTA, DOT, or some of the electeds. I think I captured about 5 or 6 questions that the group was asking. The rest of it was things that I kind of felt we've been talking about amongst ourselves in our meetings, which is the concern that the bus lane could have an adverse impact on the surrounding areas as parking shifts to side streets and traffic shifts to side streets. That seemed to be the consensus of the folks participating in my group.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. Okay, anyone else?
One thing I wanted to say, I looked over the document you sent out. I know Callista's group seemed somehow like they had triple the amount of time. They went through so many things. My group didn't have that much more to add. But the thing that I took away reviewing Jeff's notes and Callista's notes and your notes and my notes is that there were a lot of good questions asked. Some people clearly don't have a lot of transportation expertise, or some are just, bus users or something, or just in the community. But the questions raised are all good and valid, but they felt very similar to the questions asked about any change that DOT brings to any corridor. And I don't want to dismiss any of the questions. And like Jeff said, they should be presented to MTA and DOT, and, we should help relay information to people. But I think it's interesting, the more that we see, like, we're looking specifically at Flatbush, but essentially, since there's no specific plan for people to react to other than like large scale ideas, it feels like, people are always a little bit scared of change sometimes, or just have questions. But then once a change is instituted, hopefully it's for the better. If not, hopefully it could be tweaked. But it almost felt like Flatbush is not as unique as I would have expected people to be asking questions. Perhaps the fact that it stretches so many districts, like we were just talking mostly about CB9. I know some people in my group were talking very much about, no, prioritize downtown Brooklyn and like Flatbush Avenue up there. But perhaps the more unique thing is that Flatbush Avenue stretches through all of Brooklyn. But as for the changes and the ramifications of adding a lane, or does it take away parking, or there's specific hours, like, to me, those are the same questions that come up with any bus lane project throughout the city. So I think we should try to get the answers for our fellow neighbors, but also realize that, to me at least, most of the questions are not brand new questions that have not been answered before, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And the thing is, I think that there weren't surprise, just from my take, that I didn't hear too many surprises. I think there were a couple of other angles that maybe I hadn't considered, but I think there's a lot of things that have probably popped up in conversations in the committee. But I think that really what it was is just to make sure that, we're kind of reading this correctly too. So I think those questions that are there are questions that have come up here, and I think those are things that we definitely need to bring back to MTA and DOT, to your and Jeff's point. I just want, I think that might be part of that next step in terms of making sure we get answers to those. But then I definitely want to start going towards, all right, so now that when we get a better understanding of the issues and the challenges, making sure that shapes the conversation in terms of what they start planning on. So I think that they were truly pain points. I think, if you're going to close down, to Jeff's point, if you're going to start, eliminating parking on there, that's going to be a big one. I think a couple of the groups, I think in my group, talking about, well, how extensive are the changes? Are we talking about I don't know if it necessarily happens, but are they talking about traffic on Flatbush? Which is a challenge already, because I think there's just certain sections where the real estate gets really tough. But I'm sorry, but let me let others speak as well. But I think this is what we were trying to get, that kind of feedback from the community. Anybody else wanted to discuss or share thoughts on the document? Thomas?
Are you open to non-members?
No, you're not allowed to speak, sir. Absolutely, please.
Okay, I'm on the ULURP committee, but I was an educator and practitioner in transportation planning. I don't want to make this a transportation 101 comment, but apparently Flatbush Avenue has a problem, but it's not well defined. So we need to know, and there are many people who use it. Small vans, large vans, buses, trucks, bicyclists, pedestrians. Each group has its own goals and its own needs. I know that the transportation people include a bunch of experts who know how to do all this stuff. Take traffic counts now, put it in historical perspective, and begin to narrow down what the problem is for everyone before they begin cranking out solutions. But in this case, somebody said, wouldn't it be nice to have a bus lane on Flatbush Avenue? But that's kind of the cart before the horse. So maybe we should be asking them to provide a description of the process they are using that is satisfactory to us. Answering questions about what's wrong, what's right. The issue that was raised by Paco, I believe, on this is a linear system. It goes from one end of Brooklyn to the next. And like all linear systems, it goes through several political constituencies. Very complex problem. So we should be satisfied that they have defined the problem well and understand what the various options or solutions are going to do to us. There are going to be many, many unanticipated consequences to this bus lane. Some of them were raised. What happens? You're just going to take parking off of Flatbush Avenue? I think the merchants might have something to say. I think it's important for us to demand a description of the process that's going to happen, and then for us to have input on what kinds of solutions are being proposed, the bus lane being maybe just one of them. So that's my kibitz for this issue.
No, thank you for that commentary as well. And I think that's where we're trying to steer towards. And committee members jump in if you as well. I think the way they looked at Flatbush Avenue is what's that saying? If you're a hammer, everything is a nail. Everything looks like a nail to you. So MTA's coming at it and say, no, we're a transportation company. So we look at Flatbush Avenue and say, well, how do we speed the buses up and down Flatbush Avenue? So the ostensible thing is make it way easier for buses to get up and down, give them their own lane, so that way everything can go up and down much faster and they get priority lighting and everything, and that works for them. But to your point, there are a lot of unanticipated consequences that we would have to live with in the district. So this is part of the reason why we started this dialogue in terms of saying, well, listen, you know what? The priority can't solely be to speed bus lanes, because then that's going to affect a whole lot of bus speeds, because that affects a whole lot of other things up and down in the community. So just kind of establish what the priorities are. Do we want to speed buses? Sure we do. But we also have other considerations that if we're going to do any changes, we need to make sure that we're anticipating those as best as we can. Obviously, there's just not enough real estate, not enough Flatbush Avenue to get everything we want to see out of that. But we got to definitely make sure that we're coming with our priorities and what our concerns are to make sure that those are addressed in any plan that comes up. Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Dunn.
It's a critical artery and it's used by many different people. It's difficult to see everyone doing well. If the buses are improved, maybe somebody's going to pay, a pedestrian or a bicyclist or a merchant. And so those issues need to be quantified and saying to us, can you live with this?
Absolutely.
So Fred, I don't know what the plans are to convene DOT and MTA in one meeting at any time in the future, but I think that that might be something that we as a committee should strive to do, because one of the things that I think everyone here knows is that the geographical difference on the northern end, the center, and the southern end of Flatbush Avenue make it such that that one size fits all solution is not going to produce the same results in each one of those zones. You know, particularly where we are, which is the configuration that I would say begins at Nostrand Junction and ends, let's say, at Grand Army Plaza. And then from Grand Army Plaza north, it's still pretty dense. But the fact is, the southern end has a different situation and requires a different approach than what we need. So I haven't heard anything so far from MTA or DOT that seem to acknowledge and address the fact that whatever they do on one part of Flatbush, they have to do something different elsewhere. And that's what I would want to hear.
You know what? I'll give them this. I want to say that I think in their approach, they kind of looked at it in that framework you said. They're looking at it, those three sections. They said, listen, Northern Flatbush, you have some issues, challenges there, which is different from South Flatbush, especially when you get towards Kings Plaza, towards the end of that route, which is different from, and to your point, when you get to that middle section, the character changes a lot. I think they've kind of hinted towards it, but it's absolutely something that we need to make sure is a point that is taken, to your point, that it can't be one size fits all for the entire corridor. And I think I will share this. I've had conversations with some of my counterparts in other community boards as well, and Dante's been active in that in terms of the DM side, where we're trying to make sure we understand that we're having conversations as well, because we don't want it to be a divide and conquer kind of a situation. We want to make sure that this is something that works for everyone who's along the corridor to the best extent we can as well. So we're having these conversations here. We are having it on a larger macro level in terms of with the other, the adjacent community boards as well. But I think we're really working on this. We want to try and make this work to the best extent as possible.
You said corridor, and it rang a bell. I mean, the corridor is not narrow, because whatever you do on Flatbush is going to have spillover effects on both sides. If you eliminate parking, people are going to try somewhere else. The trucks have to have some place. So the word corridor should include a fairly broad swath of people who are going to be affected by whatever is done to that street.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the good things that I think one of the takeaways I got from our town hall, in terms of, I think that there was, a larger framework than just saying Flatbush. I mean, we looked at some of the intersections we know that have been problematic in the past. Definitely on a couple of occasions, I heard people talk about the merchants. And I think there was even a good point about, okay, well, listen, what about people who just use the corridor? So it's like, if you have kids who go to a school or you do certain, things on the corridor, how does that affect you stopping, doing drop-offs and pickups and things of that nature? So all to say, I think these are the questions that are coming up. And I think that, we're going to be taking the opportunity as a committee to start distilling that, to really kind of figure out where the big issues and what the priorities are going to be in terms of what we want to do. And I think, to a point that Jeff had made before, I want us to definitely get back in front of MTA and DOT, but I want us to kind of have a little bit better sense in terms of what is the ask from our part. In terms of, before you start putting stripes down the street, these are the things that CB9 and even to the greater extent, other community boards are looking at in terms of what we're trying to get out of Flatbush Avenue and the adjacent streets. I did see Andrew. Did you have your hand raised? I thought I saw him.
I did. I think you started to answer my question. I was also frustrated by the vagueness, but I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. If DOT or MTA comes to us with a fully fledged and fully prepared scheme, the response is always like, you guys just made this up. You didn't take the community's input at all. You're dictating from the top down. And I get that. But if you can provide any indication of when a follow-up is, what a follow-up would look like, I think that'd be really helpful. I also think that what you, Thomas, and Paco were all discussing, I think these vague things are fine, but I think it really should be more diluted into specific problem statements. Like, for example, I've heard that some members of the Flatbush BID, the business owners there, are worried specifically that parking removal would affect merchants' ability to sell to people that are driving in, going to the store, and then leaving. So like short-term parking limitations. And there's an easy way to see if, number one, that is a real concern, and number two, if the bus lane would affect that hypothetically. And that's to ask DOT not to push back against any kind of change, but to do a study. I mean, like, it's the 21st century. We have computer modeling. We can also just see how people are using the street and then make an informed decision based on that. I think that's a much smarter step than reacting like this.
Right. And that's the thing. I think part of it is, I think once we have the questions or we have the framework in mind, then we can ask them to do the study and say, do a model that anticipates, okay, we have, and I'm coming up with stuff. Rush hour, you have no parking on the street. There's a dedicated bus lane on the rush hours that goes up and down the avenue. And what does that create? I think one of the questions that we even ask is, okay, well, what are we talking about savings? If you're talking about you're going to add bus lanes and do all this stuff, but you're talking about a difference of 2 minutes or 3 minutes on a route, is it really worth all that headache? But I'm sorry, before I start ranting, I think we just wanted to kind of get to that point where we tell them, if we're going to ask them to do a study, we ask them what the parameters are. What do we want them to study? If it's not just bus speeds, but what else are we modeling and what are we predicting might happen on the corridor?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? Are there any other comments in terms of the town hall?
Yeah, I
Elise?
think that they need to stop making these, Jeff, what do you call it? What do you call it? The curves that sticks out, those corners that sticks out that make it very difficult for cars to.
Oh, those curb extensions?
An extension, yes.
Back downs.
Curve extension, right.
Okay.
I think it makes it very difficult for people or cars to get by. They go on top of the curb. That's what I find. I even find cars parked on that extension. Okay, what's the purpose of it all? I don't understand. This is especially delivery trucks. I mean, it's designed to make the city not flow easily, it seems to me.
It is. It is exactly that, Felice. The neck down is designed to reduce the speed at which any vehicle can make a turn on that corner and to narrow the distance that a pedestrian needs to traverse the street. The easiest way to think about it is using geometry, where if you have the desire to go in a direction that's 90 degrees off of where you are, and you can make it gently, you'll go faster. But if you have to stop, make a hard turn, there's no way that you could speed around that corner. And that's why they're popping up all over, because if there's anything that they're successful at doing is making people slow down. Everything else that you're saying is correct. People will park on them. They're an obstruction, but I don't think that those secondary issues are being considered. Their main goal is to make sure that when people turn, they're going so slow that they can't miss a person in the street. That's one. Two, that the amount of time that the person who's crossing the street is actually in a travel lane for a vehicle is minimized. So it's a hard thing to push back on. They're not pretty. They definitely take up 1 or 2 spaces at the end of every block. but they're probably one of the most successful tools in the DOT's toolbox.
Right.
And actually, we're going to touch on a little bit on that too, a little bit further down in terms of some of the district traffic calming. Yeah, we'll touch on a little piece of that as well. So
can
only
you-
because oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can you touch on what I submitted to you, please? Because that's another example. They want to make a pathway for cyclers, but in doing so, it has become a hazard and very dangerous for pedestrians and also drivers. That extension there on Prospect Park and Grand Island Plaza, please. Can that be included, please?
It's definitely something we're looking at. So no, we definitely heard that, and that's going to be something we look at in terms of, where are they appropriate? And if there's other things that they need to do, because obviously if people are hitting them, that means people aren't seeing them, which kind of defeats the purpose. So those will be questions that we'll look at as well. And sometimes if it's even appropriate for the intersection.
If I may, I'm gonna leave it short. In riding the buses, I noticed that the buses have to extend themselves outward. And in doing so, the cars that are trying to turn to go down Flatbush, the cars that are coming up Flatbush, that's on the opposite side of the library, they too have to move out of the way because they find that the traffic is going into them. So this is what's happening. And that's why you have the bus that had collided with a truck, because the truck and the bus cannot fit on that lane. Not to mention cars, but a truck and a bus cannot fit. And that's why that accident did occur with that bus. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We're gonna have to move on very shortly. So Ms. Fleming, I see you. I thought I saw another hand up earlier. Zach, was that you? Did you have your hand up before? Okay, hand is down. All right, so we'll see Ms. Fleming, we'll see Paco, and then we're gonna have to move on.
This is
Okay,
just a quick,
Sure.
this is just a quick observation. When I was driving down Franklin Avenue, there's, I want to say, an extension maybe on, is it President or Union? I can't remember, but and they have these like poles that stand out that is kind of bendable. At the corner of that, I guess that extension or whatever they have there, I actually observed a delivery truck back up on the street and push those cones down, and he did it as if he does it every time when he makes a delivery. So the time and the effort that was put into putting this as a safety precaution, now, the delivery person, for whatever reason, took the liberty of making his own parking space, and to me, damaging those things that were put in place to for safety purposes. That's just an observation. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. Paco.
Yeah, the one other thing I wanted to say, just to, there's a final button on the Flatbush Avenue bus lane topic, is just that I think it's also important for us to remember there's the 2019 Streets Master Plan law is dictating that there's a certain number of bus lanes that the city implement, and the Mayor Adams has looked at Flatbush Avenue as one of the likely corridors to get some of the legally required mileage. And the fact that it has, as we mentioned, it goes through so many community boards and elected officials, they are all vocally in support, at least, I don't know about all the way down by like Kings Plaza, but Lincoln Wrestlers District up in downtown Brooklyn, Crystal Hudson's district, Rita Joseph's district. So like, it's definitely not a one size fits all fix, but it is almost a one size fits all political support for it. So I think it's important for us to ask important questions, but also realize like, it's going to be a losing battle if people think, oh, let's just fight this and not have any changes. Like the status quo is clearly not working for the community and not for the elected leaders. So I think there is going to be some sort of change. And I think we want to not just swat away DOT saying they want to make changes. I think we want to make sure we tell them, hey, the change you want to make there works there. Over here by us, it may have to be a little bit different. But I think sometimes it's easy for a community board to have an adversarial position with any city agency, and I don't think that usually benefits anybody. So I hope that we, work with DOT rather than against them.
No, absolutely. All right, so in terms of next steps, so what I want to do, and I heard it before, so what I want to do is we'll distill that document we sent out to some of the questions that I think were raised. So at the very least, we might be, hopefully they'll send that to DOT and they can give us some initial answers. So hopefully that answers some of those and gives us a little bit better perspective. And then what I would like to do, hopefully within the next, and I think based on, maybe perhaps based on what comes out of that, we'll have a better sense in terms of what our next steps are in terms of how do we want to proceed, how do we craft a recommendation. But we'll at least start with that step in terms of getting that information, get that back to the committee so we can have that conversation and move forward on that. All right, so we'll try and get that for next meeting. Mr. Thomas, I see you. But it's got to be very quick.
Yep. Is there any possibility of a coalition of all the various boards that are affected by what happens by this linear system? Because it doesn't stop at the border.
We're already thinking in that sense. I've had conversations with some of my counterparts, and Dante has on his side as well. So absolutely, this is something we're looking at and we're contemplating. Okay. All right.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. And if there's any additional questions, please always feel free to send that to the board office or to myself as well. And, and we try and integrate that. All right. So we're going to move on to item B, the Brooklyn Bus Network redesign. So there was a district level, workshop that was held, was it last month? I want to say it was last month because they're all blending together at this point. So, so definitely, I think that there are a number of changes that are proposed in the district. Some of them are smaller, but some of them do have some definite impacts in terms of the bus lines that are in the district. Dante was able to reach out. I think that the original document was over 600 pages, and we have heard a lot of feedback that it's overwhelming. To say we're going to look through all of those. So he was able to get one that is district level that looks at all the bus lines that come through our district specifically. We've gotten feedback already in terms of, I think that there are a number of lines that they're concerned about. And I think one of the concerns, one about the changes that are proposed, but two, even about the outreach that's done as well, where we probably need to try and figure out some better outreach in terms of, I think that there are constituencies along those lines that we need to hear from. And perhaps they may need to activate in terms of giving input. So let me do this. Let me just open it up. So for the committee members and for those who are in attendance, have any, are there any comments, initial comments with respect to the proposed draft?
I know I'm overall, no, we're not going to get, everyone's not going to be pleased. Like some people there'll be some winners, some losers. But there currently are also many winners and losers kind of in the bus routes in our neighborhood. I know there's a lot of talk about the Ebbets Field houses moving. I understand why MTA wants to move stuff to Nostrand Rogers and make use of the bus only lane. And I know taking stuff off of Bedford is a concern, but I think overall, I was kind of pleased with the draft, and I think I'm pleased with the possible additions of, what was it, the B10 route that I think was going, like they wanted to make more use of Empire Boulevard. I don't think it was going to be a bus lane, but Empire Boulevard to have more coherent, I guess, east-west kind of linear service, and they were going to change the B12 route as well. I think there were some good changes in there. What I am most focused on is, I think with the new addition of that B10 line and the already like onslaught of buses that come to the Lincoln, Flatbush, Ocean area where they all do the roundabout, I'm just I guess I'm puzzled how it's all going to work, because it already doesn't seem to be working when there's buses and layovers there, and then for them to add more buses, even if they move like the one bus stop on that corner, there's just a lot of buses coming there. I think bus service is good for the neighborhood. Tweaking it is good. Overall, I think the plan works, but still needs some changes. But yeah, that it feels almost like an abundance of buses there that I do wonder if they've realized how much space it would actually need to make the changes that they're proposing.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, it's not all bad. It's not all good. And I think that's what it is. It's not all bad. It's not all good. And it's really about trying to figure out the balance. I think one of the other things, some of the other feedback we've heard is I think there's what part of the intent is also, I think, or one of the things we need to look at is what stops are moved or eliminated. Because I think that part of the plan is also to reduce the amount of stops that are on there. So that way they're not every block and a half, 2 blocks. But then again, if you start making them every 3 or 4 blocks, that becomes problematic too in terms of access. So that's some of the feedback I would definitely like to get with some of these in terms of there needs to be advocacy for particular stops in terms of they need to be there for certain reasons. No, but thank you for that. Dante, I do see your hand. And if there's anybody else as well, please just let me know. It's great to speak as well. What I do.
Yes, no, Paco makes actually a very interesting comment. Now I'm thinking about it. There are a lot of buses that I guess terminate there or wait for their layover. So it's almost like putting a bus depot right next to Prospect Park. And I'm wondering if they've ever considered, like right when you go on to Flatbush heading toward the Prospect Park Zoo, there's an area right there before you get to Empire Boulevard. It's open, like the buses could, if they could figure it out, they could, maybe terminate there or something. It's relatively close to that area.
You mean the Willick entrance?
Yeah, it's like, let me see if I can show you just really quick.
That's the parking lot you're talking about. I think is next to, I can't remember, there's a few things there, but there's a parking lot right next to the corner, like right behind the tree, I think.
Yeah.
Behind the Flatbush tree?
Oh, okay. I thought he meant at the park.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about on the park side. I think there's
like right here. I'm gonna show you. You see this area at Prospect? Well, like it's in, this area.
Yeah, that's called the Willink entrance.
Yeah, what is do you know if there's any historical significance to this entrance? I'm curious because it looks like an area where buses could.
Well, it was the, when the park used to be open to cars, that was one of the major points of entries for cars, right? And then as time went by, cars are no longer a thing there. So I think it's only official vehicles that are using it now. And most recently, I think there's a city bike station.
There's a city bike station and that's where the 2-way bike lane is too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it is a wide open area. I don't know. I don't know. It's across the street from the train.
That's probably mapped as parkland. So
yeah,
I wouldn't get my hopes up about that spot.
I don't get my hopes up about many things, but it's always worth the question. It's always the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You have to have a dour expression when you're in CB9. All right, Mr. Greenberg, we see you.
I guess I'm kind of expanding on what Paco and Dante both said about the buses on Lincoln. So now the buses often double park and it's impossible to get by if you're on a bike or in a car. So I'm wondering if, as a follow-up to the meeting we had with DOT about the Flatbush Lincoln intersection, if we could do something with them about Lincoln between Flatbush and Ocean, talk about the buses, talk about possibly some traffic calming. Maybe there should be no parking there at all if there are so many buses, especially since most of those parking spots are filled with cars that have vests in the window and don't have any authorization to park there. So there's a lot that could be done there. There's still probably going to be too many buses, but I think that's a real trouble spot we should meet with DOT on.
Yeah, I think that DOT is even kind of tipped the hat in terms of they're looking at that, because I think it's that whole corridor. That corridor is my word today. Lincoln Road is problematic. I think everybody sees it and everybody lives that, where it's like, between the buses, the double parking, and the buses coming out and everything else.
And where you go into the park, I mean, there's so many things there. Yeah,
it is tough. I do believe that there's going to probably be some change at some point in the near future. won't be fun. At the very least, we'll probably lose some spots on that northern side of Lincoln, but there probably needs to be a deeper think in terms of what are we doing on that road.
Right. Plus,
And it won't be fun, but yeah, I think that needs to be a better conversation.
right. Plus the connection to the new bike lane that's going to be on Ocean. So we should talk about that whole area with them.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Great.
All right. Are there any other comments about the bus network redesign? Ms. Fleming, I see you.
I was just wondering, while we have several subject experts on the line that have backgrounds in transportation and various degrees of their career, I'll say, has there been any consideration for this particular committee, for not to say that the people on the line are not subject experts, but is there someone that we could go to that can kind of run the numbers and to show, because as we're going down to, I'm just saying Lincoln Road part, you know, I hardly ever go down that way because it's so congested all the time, the buses and everything, it just is like a nightmare. You know, do we know how many people go through there? How many cars are going through there? How many buses are going there as we're making these decisions, so that it's not, you know, that we're being emotional about it, but we've got like some data that we've got. I'm just making it up because I'm just making it up, that each day we have 200,000 people, we'll say, that go through there. Because I guess some people are coming out the train, some people are going on the bus, some people are doing different things. They may be biking to the park, they may be transporting their kids. How can we break down the data to show that it's not working now, guys? And can you consider looking at different locations to terminate right there? Because do all the buses have to terminate there? Is there something set in stone that this is the best termination spot? That's my comment. Thank you.
I would suspect that DOT probably has some level of data on that. And perhaps, you know, Dante, would you be able to check to see if there's any data they have that kind of data in terms of, you know, foot traffic, cars going through? And if they don't have that, maybe that's something we would ask for. It's like, can we start monitoring that just so we get a sense?
Because I'm wondering on our part, on our end, for a stronger argument for certain things, even the Flatbush Avenue corridor. Some areas of Flatbush Avenue are much wider than others, making it more easily for cars to go back and forth, like on Rogers Avenue. When you come up, I guess, from the south of Rogers Avenue, and when you get to Empire, it's kind of wide. But then when you go up towards Eastern Parkway, it's kind of narrow and it's, you know, more congestion there. So as we're making these decisions, I'm not sure how the topography as well as the population impacts how we make the decision for easy access for all the individuals that may be going and using different forms of transportation for whatever reason.
Yeah, you know, and just to go back to a point you made originally, I think the reason why we have that a lot of buses stop there is because of the train station. It ends up being almost a natural terminus for people to say, okay, well, listen, the end of the ride, so now I can either get on a couple of different bus lines, or I'm getting on the train. So I think that was part of the reason why they probably ended it there. But maybe that's the conversation. Should they end there, or should they just pass through? And is there another more logical place to have the buses lay over? So I don't know, just to throw something out, maybe they go through, they don't come around and end there, they go up to Flatbush Avenue or Washington. On that backside on Washington Avenue, I think maybe there's, you know, places for buses where that's where they end, and then they continue, they get back on the route from there. You know, all options that maybe we can consider, but to your point, I think what you started with is, yeah, we need to get data on this because that helps us get a better sense of what we're looking at and what we might be able to do.
Thank you.
Okay, I did see, Andrew, did you have your hand up? I thought I saw.
Nope, you got it.
Oh, okay. All right then. Okay. Now the one thing I did want to say with that is I do have a concern because we've gotten a lot of feedback, and this is something that we want to make sure that people have an opportunity to weigh in on. So one of the things I would like to do, because I thought the town hall worked very well, I want to consider outreach in terms of, even if CV9 is able to do something similar to what we did with the town hall for the bus corridor, for some of the lines that are affected, even if we can get people to come and speak to that, because I think that there are definitely concerns about the outreach and the impacts on especially a few of the places that we mentioned this evening. So that might be something. Are there particular bus lines that we would want to look at? I think the 49 is definitely a natural one. Are there any other bus lines that we want to try and do an outreach just to kind of get a sense? Do we want to try and get a sense of the B10? What lines would we, want to look at in the district?
Is B10 a new route, Fred? I'm not familiar with B10.
That will be a new route, and that goes to the point, I think, Paco, if I'm misattributing, they're looking at doing a B10 because if we notice, there's no bus route that goes straight up Empire Boulevard. Everything turns off at some point. So you don't have anything that's going west to east. So I think the B10 is a route that's proposed that would actually utilize more of Empire Boulevard. I can't remember offhand where the route's supposed to go up directly, but I think that's part of the objective with that. Paco, do you remember specifically?
I think it was supposed to go, I took note of it because my daughter's school is like the edge of Brownsville, and I think it goes Empire Boulevard all the way to East New York Avenue and further east that way.
And
So-
that was terminating at Lincoln Road also?
Yeah, I think
I
the western terminus would be Lincoln Road by Prospect Park, but the eastern terminus, it would go down towards Pitkin Avenue and stuff, like all the way over there. I think as a
Something like that.
just kind of central Brooklyn route.
Yeah, and to that point, it might be good, to get some feedback on that, support, or if there's any tweaks that would probably need to be made to that as well. So at this western terminus, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say that the one thing I've heard from having sat in on other community board discussions is the impact of reducing the number of stops that many of the lines will have going forward, which will result in people having to walk further. I'm on the Nextdoor Neighbors platform. I don't know if any of you guys are also. And I know that there's an intense debate going on in Park Slope where they're reducing the number of stops. The proposal is to reduce the number of stops that whatever the local bus over there is will make. And it's getting mixed reviews, some not so pretty because it's pitting people with challenges health-wise against otherwise healthy people, because the elderly and people who need a bus to stop every other block are the first who are complaining. And, I kind of am the fly on the wall because it's not CB9, but, I'm on it. And it's sad because there are younger people who are just saying like, oh, you just can walk another 2 or 3 blocks. And I think we need to be mindful of the same thing, because I think some of the proposals were to reduce the number of stops on the 49, to move the 49 from Bedford to Nostrand heading south. Those are the things that we need to be mindful of. And we don't have representation on this committee that is of a certain age. Let's be honest, right? I might be one of the oldest people on this committee, but we need to be mindful of that, even if they're not here to speak up. What is the impact of having a bus stop 4 or 5 blocks away when it used to stop every other block? So that would be one of the things I would want to raise if we have the audience of MTA.
Okay. All right. I do see some hands going up. I do want to make sure we move on. So Andrew, I see you. Dante, I see you. Valerie, we see you. And then we just want to kind of put a bow on that. We'll go to the next steps and go to the next item. Andrew, go ahead.
Yes, speaking quickly, I totally agree with what was just said. I think in addition to the spacing of stops, I think we should also consider the spacing of time and the timetables. I'm, a frequent rider of the B44, but I saw that they were introducing a third variation. There was the SBS, the limited, and then the local, but there was really no distinction between those 3 that was actually in the documents. If you could, or if somebody on this board could kind of get DOT or MTA to explain what those differences are, how does that, like, I take the B44 to get to my job on the weekends when the service is abysmal, and I've given up and started biking, even though it's not as safe. But like the other thing is buses that have multiple termini or just stop halfway through, the kind of ratio of buses that, again, speaking from experience, B44, it just stops at Lee and Flushing Avenue sometimes, and then everybody gets off and waits for the next bus that is actually going all the way down to Williamsburg. Like, having those minutia that explain how you are as a rider of the bus is very different than looking at an overall map. The time to walk between stops, but also the time that you have to sit out in the cold or stand and sit there waiting for the next bus, which on a weekend, on a Sunday schedule, even for the SBS, is sometimes 20 or 30 minutes.
No, and thank you for those points. No, so absolutely. So we'll make sure we try and get that information as well. And we need to get that kind of feedback. Thank you for that. Ms. Fleming.
Well, this is just to piggyback off of what Jeff said. For those of you who don't know, I have a position at the Major Owen Center. And so I get to see thousands of people come to our facility. Jeff indicated about the abilities of some of the people that are a little older, but being here at the Armory, I see a lot of people of younger ages that have abilities that impact their activities of daily living. Some people are dropped off at Accessoride and different things like that. So as we're looking at our data, when we're looking at age, also the physical abilities, because there's quite a few young folk that are coming here to the Armory that need to get on the lift, they're on wheelchairs, they're having their children and different things. So as we look at moving the buses, that the ability of an individual, whatever the age, may also be in consideration as well. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And I would probably put it out as well. I think if we even think of what are the places that would absolutely, we would need to make sure that there's bus service that's close. So yeah, maybe there needs to be a bus stop that's closer to, to the Armory. Yeah, maybe the one bus stop they don't move is the one that's right in front of Ebbets Field. You leave that one alone. So even if they're talking about eliminations, and not saying that all eliminations are bad, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to have it one block after another block after another block. But sometimes, yeah, you do need to have it on one block, on a particular block, just because of the population and the demographics that are there. But these are great points, and we'll definitely make sure we do that. So one of the things, I'll probably talk offline with Dante about that, in terms of, I would like to see if we could set up something similar to what we did with the town hall, in terms of being able to get some of these constituencies together to kind of get a sense of the pain points, demographics, and to the points that have been made about, who's on the buses, what places, especially we need to make sure are not affected by some of these service changes. So what we'll do is, Dante, I'll talk with you offline about that, and we'll share that with the committee. We'll circulate that with the committee in terms of getting some ideas about that and trying to get a date around that. Okay, all right, we're gonna move on to item C. This will be a little bit quicker in terms of, I just want to provide an update, and this is something that has been on the radar of the committee for a while. I know that I think it was in the November meeting, there was a resolution that was passed. There was a vote that was passed by the committee in terms of the Lincoln Road, Washington Flatbush intersection. We were able to convene a meeting, a site visit with Department of Design and Construction, with DOT. We had a few of the committee members who were there as well. So just in terms of the update with that, so the construction is going to be finished over there. I believe we're anticipating towards the end of this month. But I think from the walkthrough we did, I think it was really good to have them there physically to see what our concerns are for that section. In terms of the traffic calming, pedestrian safety is still going to be an issue. Almost on cue, we're right there, and we see an 18-wheeler come around and try and take a turn from Lincoln onto Washington Avenue. So I think that, they saw it, and I think they definitely understood that there's definitely some additional work that needs to be done. DDC is finishing the construction piece of that, but I think there's going to be some additional conversations in terms of the traffic calming and safety, signage that needs to be there, and perhaps some enforcement issues that we also need to make sure we're addressing with NYPD. But I just wanted to give that as an update. I think that there's definitely progress being made, and we're going to be looking at that intersection after the completion to make sure that some additional changes are made. With that being said, is anybody, Paco, you were there as well, Stanley, were you there? Is there anything you want to add with respect to that in terms of concerns or feedback?
No, that was a great recap. Thank you.
Okay. And again,
One
go
thing
ahead,
I'd
sorry.
add is I'm just looking forward to it obviously being done, but then what the community can make of that area. Because even right now with a few Jersey barriers in there that are still for, protecting the construction equipment, it's a lot of space. It's actually like, and it's right next to 1 block from the park, but right next to the subway as well. I feel like it has potential to be some kind of community gathering area. The fact that there was like a dozen of us standing there very comfortably, even as an 18-wheeler made an insane U-turn from Flatbush to Washington. But that was not possible before. So I think it's great that some pedestrian safety has been added. And then it'll be, what are the finishing touches that we need to push forward to make sure it doesn't become the parking lot again and it becomes a beautified area. I know Stanley was talking about maybe raised planters or things like that, like what is feasible. But I do think it's a potentially a really great addition to what was otherwise just, a dilapidated crosswalk. So.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. All right. So more to come, and definitely after, we'll loop back in and make sure we loop back in with DOT right after that project is completed. Okay. All right. So now I wanted to go to item D, which is about district calming and safety improvements. So one of the concerns that we've had, and we sent out the spreadsheet, and Paco, we saw your email. But so what we've done is the district office has compiled a spreadsheet of as many of the outstanding requests that we've had with DOT. The bulk of them are for speed bumps in terms of there have been safety issues and concerns that have been addressed over the years. We had a number for bike racks as well, requests for speed cameras and things of that nature. Dante and I had an opportunity to speak with DOT, and I think one of the concerns, or one of the issues that we've had is that, the problem is DOT takes such a long time to turn around. If you ask them for one thing, there's a study involved. It takes such a long time to turn it around, but the problem is if it's not a favorable outcome, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, what do we do? You're not giving us a speed hump, but the people are still speeding down the streets. So from the conversation Dante and I had with DOT, part of the problem is they are a ticket-oriented agency, so to speak. So really it's about closing out tickets. So when they get it, they'll look at it and they'll close out the tickets. But they're not really necessarily as proactive in terms of saying, these are the options that we can give you. So part of what part of the suggestion was, we need to start making multiple asks when it comes to some of these things. So for example, if there is an intersection where we know that there is speeding or whatever's happening, we have to ask for a speed hump, but we also should be asking for several things at one time. Because they'll only do one ticket, but we can put in more than one ticket for any given intersection. So to use Washington, because I know that's something that's near, that's been Washington and Montgomery. Ask for a speed camera, ask for speed humps, ask for 3 or 4 things, put them all in at one time. And then it's on DOT to say, okay, well, listen, you know what? One of them has to come through. One of them has to come through, but ultimately, it's a known intersection, and they are going to be put on the hook for resolving it one way or another. But we just can't do this. Put it in 1 year, it doesn't work. Wait another year, and then that doesn't work, and then wait another year. So the idea being speeding that up or putting the ball in DOT's court to take care of that, which is part of the reason why we sent out the toolkit. So we did send out a toolkit. It's a little bit of a read, but I think there's some sections in there specifically about speed calming, traffic calming, where they talk about some of the things that we know already in terms of the neck downs, speed humps. There's barriers sometimes they're able to put up. The bollard, I think it was the bollards, the rumbles, rumble strips, bollards, and those things of that nature. But I want us to be able to start thinking of it from that perspective of, especially since we're closer to these things, what are the 3 or 4 things we think might be good on these intersections? So that way we can make sure that as a board, we're taking 3 or 4 paths at a time. But we definitely wanted to make this an educational opportunity. The one thing that was ironic that wasn't included in there was the speed cameras. But I want to make sure that we include that as one of the things we ask for as well when we're looking at these situations. Were there any questions? At this time, I'm open the floor. Were there any questions or comments?
So I guess I appreciate the way that we'll make the multiple asks, I guess, but like, I still wonder, like, what's gonna come of it, or what can we do? Because it still will be, even these asks that we make will still take, speed hump still takes 2 years for them to get back to you on, most things are like a 12 to 18 month study period. And like, I'm thinking of that, the parent, Eva, who came to a few meetings that I know lives on Lefferts in Washington. And like, she's been requesting a speed hump for 8 years on that street. And like, it was interesting to see the full grid, and I appreciate you sending it out, but like all these requests, like, I feel like we just, or at least on certain streets that, let's say Sterling, Lefferts, Lincoln, Maple, like, they all have speeding. It's not enough for DOT to say like, oh my gosh, this is insane, but people are complaining about the same thing on every single street. So I just don't want us to waste our time and energy. Okay, now we have to make 3 requests for each of these 6 streets when it really is like a neighborhood plan that is needed. And like, some of it's already had, like Rita Joseph already wrote that letter requesting all of those speed humps. She outlined like 8 of them that she wants in there. Like, so I'm still a little stuck as to what we can do. I mean, I do think using a broader stroke and asking for more things that have, data to show that they prove to be successful in reducing crashes is good. But I'm just worried, like, what do we tell all these people that have been coming to our meetings, or us that are making the requests as well? Like, okay, now we have to make 3 times the number of requests and for more things, but what results are we going to get differently?
Hopefully the plan is that we get a result, as opposed to serially making requests that take a year and then another year and then another year, another year. If there's 3 or 4 of them, it takes a year. One of them has to pull through in a year, because I think that was roughly the amount of time that they said it takes for the DOT to do the study. Actually, probably have to add another 6 to 10 months or something like that, because then they have to schedule it, because they do these things on a cycle or rotation. But the idea being an answer comes back. I think that one of the things that we hit on that works as well is that this is a list that needs to be shared with our elected officials as well, because then they have the opportunity to put the pressure on. So if they don't fear the chair of CB9 or the district manager, perhaps they'll get a better reaction, from the council, local council members, in terms of, I've got constituents who are beating down the door. And it's perhaps that, multiple asks coming from multiple places, but it's consistent. Everybody knows, and we're all on the same page. And we're leveraging those relationships with the elected officials. It's not an answer. I mean, it doesn't speed things up, and I know that's not great, but I think we want to make sure we get to that point where I think we're making a push in terms of doing the old ways not working. Let's see if hopefully this gets us better results. Okay, Valerie, I see you, then I see Felice, and then Stanley.
Okay, this is quick. I was wondering, who is our real advocate? We've been talking this for quite some time, and you've been doing your due diligence, putting it in, following up. But where do we go, as Paco is saying? We put in the one request, it's denied or it's put on the back table. So now we're saying put 3 on the table, which will probably be denied or they look at. So I'm trying to wonder, while I appreciate Rita Joseph sending in her information, but do we need to kind of put them, I don't want to say on blast, but is there a collective collaboration that could occur that's showing this systematic approach that DOT have of not doing real work? And I'm not going to say not doing real work, but But we've been asking for speed bumps for a while. We've been asking for certain things for a while, certain traffic calming things for a while. And why does it take so long? So I'm asking, what is the 5-year plan? What is the 2-year plan? On the 3-year plan? Are we looking at Brooklyn South, at the southeast part? Or we're looking at the northwest part and we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z? What is the real schedule that we're talking about? And why does it take so long? And for example, the speed, well, we call it a speed bump, but it's a speed hump on Crown Street. I believe the reason why we were able to obtain it is because we were able to get the assistance of the Citizens Committee of New York, and they were helping to advocate. And it seemed like soon after that, within like maybe a year, we were able to get the speed bump. So again, how can we make this a bigger concern, because it blankets such a wide area? Thank you.
Point well taken, and you're right. And perhaps and you know what, and as you say that, you're right. Maybe we shouldn't be accepting the status where it's like, if that's the model, where it's like they do one ticket and it takes a year and another ticket takes a year, maybe that's the problem. They need to do it differently. To that point, then listen, that's something that perhaps we think about that and we make that recommendation. We can do that as a resolution from this committee, a resolution from the board that we can take to our local electeds and say, listen, we need to talk to DOT because whatever they're doing is not working. It's not working. It doesn't work for us, and it just keeps situations open for years. And at least, it threatens lives. And perhaps that's the pressure we need to put on them.
Because I'm not trying to complain. I'm just trying to say, how do we kind of, okay, come on, folks.
I mean,
how
no,
can
you
we come up
shouldn't
with
be complaining.
you know.
And even if it was a complaint, it's a valid complaint because then, we're living with these situations for years.
Right.
That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. And you're right. And perhaps we should play a little bit more offense with this as well. And
Thank
really
you.
bring it to them. Okay. Felice, we see you in the
Yes, let's complain. Let's complain. I'm union. So that's what we do. So here you have it. I've been asking for some sort of I don't know if to call it a blockage, I don't know if to call it a speed bump. Okay, let's say speed bump, but not on Washington, more likely on Montgomery, so that they don't turn into that corner so quickly. Now, we've had several accidents already. We have several requests already. There are police reports. So I'm wondering, can we collectively put all of that together to show the emphasis and the importance of this strip on Montgomery? This is my question, because I think that when it's being sent through, it's just another request, and there is no attachment to go to this request or to these requests to show the urgency and the importance of when you're going to do this, because this has been going on for 7 years, or is it 8? Okay, but we're steadily getting accidents on this corner. So I think a police report should be attached. I have plenty of pictures to submit back to you if you need. I still have them to show that the cars are going into the building, into the stores. Okay, we've had an accident already here where somebody did get killed because they left the bike there to show, this is a memorial right here in the corner. So I don't know what more they want. Come on, this is enough already. Thank you.
No, absolutely. No. If you can resend whatever you have. Dante, if I could ask, can we get the crash data and everything like that? Can we request that crash data from DOT? Make sure we get everything, because I think it's time that, we start going over heads and just create something that Crystal Hudson can go and say, no, listen, you know what? Over the last 7 years, how many accidents, how many, how many injuries, how many and everything like that. And this is just something that perhaps we need to go bigger, because it is something that's been a situation for way too long, way past time.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Mr. Greenberg, and then I think we need to move on to the next item. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. This idea might work. I don't think we've tried it before, but in conjunction with what you just suggested about getting all the crash data, have we ever requested to make part of the district a neighborhood slow zone? Because that might just jump over all these millions of little details about where you put a speed bump, 6 inches, at least 2 feet from a manhole cover, and at least 5 feet from a driveway, and 1,000 feet from a speed camera. I mean, the list they make up makes you think, okay, they're just looking for ways that they don't have to put in a speed bump. So, for one thing, maybe applying for the neighborhood slow zone is a way to push that through. And also maybe it's time for a few community boards to get together and say, look, these rules are ridiculous and they're just stopping us from creating a safe place. I mean, I hadn't looked at the rules that carefully. I know that on Lefferts, after the 8 years of not, I think at some point in there, they said yes to the speed bump and then they changed their mind and then they didn't say why. And what we finally heard was, oh, it's too close to a driveway. And I was riding down Bedford recently and there's a block, I think maybe it's Foster and Farragut, and there are tons of driveways and there's a speed bump on that block. So I thought, okay, this is an example of why they can do it. So, maybe they're not looking carefully enough. Maybe they're just using their rules as an excuse. But I think we just need to apply pressure from every direction we can think of. That's all.
No,
Thank you.
No, points well taken, points well taken. And maybe that's something we can discuss as well in terms of the impacts of that. The only thing with the neighborhood slow zone is only because we have so many corridors that, really kind of move between North and South Brooklyn. There may be some pushback or issues or challenges with that, but I think it's something we should discuss in terms of, and some of these rules are arcane and perhaps they need to be looked at in terms of, why do they exist? Because they're stopping and, doing anything. Paco, we'll see you, but then we have to move on. We'll see.
Sure. I just want to say I actually love the idea of the neighborhood slow zones. I think a lot of CV9 is geographically, it does have some major corridors, but unlike a lot of other CBs, it's very much a grid. It's kind of like two different grids that are stacked on each other, and it kind of works well for neighborhood slow zones, except they haven't done one since I think 2015. I think they're kind of out of DOT's toolkit. So maybe some elements of those could be done, or we could get them to restart the program with us as like a pilot neighborhood or something. But neighborhood slow zones as had existed in the last decade it's now almost been a decade that they don't exist. So
right, but it's still on their website. So
yeah, but the last one they presented was like 2014 or 15 or
no,
something.
you're right. They need to be resurrected.
Okay. No, so that's definitely something we look into. Okay. All right. So we will definitely be following. There's a couple of items that we're definitely going to follow up with. So there's some data that Dante is going to get. We'll try and see if we can get some additional information on the neighborhood slow zone. And I think I like the idea of the speed calming. We need to build a coalition because there's too many things. DOT says no, 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 no. And I know that a lot of other neighborhoods have had similar issues. So maybe there needs to be some kind of rethink in terms of how do we do these things so we can implement faster and eliminate these situations. Dante, we see.
Yes, quickly. I just want to be honest. I'm going to draw you to the realities. I know I'm going to put the request in, but just because I put it in, don't expect it's going to come back fast, but I will stay on top of them because they're my favorite agency. So just know that. I'll put the request in, I'll stay on them, but it might take a little bit of time.
Thank you, Dante.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to item 5, district bike lane survey. So this has been a conversation in terms of as we're looking at the district, it's a patchwork of bike lanes and sharrows and all kinds of other things. And I think it's at least worth us having a discussion where, especially as you see bike traffic is increasing, the safety issues have just done, the crashes and the injuries and everything you see that they're increasing. We should have a more comprehensive dialogue around what bike cycling in the district to make sure that it's something that is safer. It makes biking more predictable. We decrease the amount of accidents and issues and everything of that nature. So one of the things that I did want to do, as a matter of fact, Dante, do we have a representative from DOT this evening?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay, we were trying to get someone from DOT to show up for this evening to actually give some information with respect to the bike surveys.
Yeah, they didn't respond to that request, by the way.
Okay. All right, that's an offline conversation I'll have. But one of the things we do want to do is we want to have someone come and give us at least information in terms of what data points they use, what results we would expect, what kinds of things, you know, and toolkit is one of the other words of the night. What's in the toolkit with respect to that as well? You know, because I know in a lot of instances, the city has put in protected bike lanes. Get a sense of when does that make sense? When does that not make sense? And what are the things they put into effect with regards to that? Is it, you know, curbside bike lanes, the effect of street, you know, if it's on the street side, how does that work, and a number of different things. But I just want to make sure that we're working from a position of information. We're informed in terms of what things potentially might be in play if we go down the route of the bike study. But so that was part of what I had in mind for item 5, and I apologize because that was the intent to have somebody here to speak to that. But we are going to make sure that somebody comes in and has that conversation with us so we can start moving forward in terms of at least, you know, see where we're going to go with that. Dante.
Yes, I just quickly found in the city charter about the slow zones. So it says that the commissioner shall establish neighborhood slow zones in which speed limits of 20 miles per hour apply on or along designated highways for the purpose of implementing traffic calming measures. The commissioner shall establish not less than 7 neighborhood slow zones, which shall contain not less than 5 blocks per zone annually in the years of 2014 to 2015. So I think that they only were establishing them in those 2 years, and that's it. That's the way that it reads in the administrative code.
Question, how did that come into existence? Was that legislation from the city council, or is that administrative action from DOT?
I've got to dig, I got to dig deeper, but that was just a look at the charter.
Okay, no, it's good to know. So let's dig into that some more and let's see, because perhaps that's an ask we ask from our elected officials. You know, it's something that a program that ended in 2015, but perhaps we need to look at addition, you know, resurrecting it, and you know, even us thinking about where would that make sense. So that might be something we look into. Okay, but thank you for that information, and we'll send that out to the committee as well. We'll create, you know, send that resource out. Okay, all right, so we are now up to item 6, which would be old business. I don't believe we have anything on the table at this time.
Wait, but before we leave the other one, Fred, I just like,
sure.
I know you and Dante are doing all you can, but I'm just like exhausted of we've been trying to get DOT to come to a meeting since September. So like, why are they going to come next month to present about bike lane statistics or anything like that? And like separately, I do think their website, much like you sent out the traffic calming toolkit, I'm sure that they have a page similar about bike lane things. So, you know, I think some of it's on us to do the research, you know, separately on our own time, and we can just look at things. But I do think it's a good idea to get DOT here to talk us through what might be feasible, not of citywide statistics, but just within CV9. But that requires DOT coming here. And like, it's literally like, I know you're trying, but it's literally been since the September meeting that we've said a DOT rep is going to come. It's like,
Actually, I think it goes back to last May.
yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, yeah.
We want a report from them on Ocean Avenue also. So we really need them.
They will be here next meeting, because I don't promise things, and I don't like when people make promises, and they promised me that they would be here. So they are going to be here next meeting.
Yeah, and this will be something specifically I'm going to bring up with Borough Hall and the commissioner. The commissioner is going to get a letter from me directly as well.
Great.
You know, this is a conversation we've already had in terms of it's a city charter thing where they are supposed to be responsive and come when we ask them to come. You know what? I always get it. Life happens. Maybe you don't come every meeting. Makes sense. Maybe there's not a value in that. But if we've asked a number of times over a few months, that is just a blatant disrespect for the board, and it's clearly a violation of the city charter. So you know what? If we need to go that route, we'll go that route. We can do it the easy way, or we can go harder if we need to. But you know what? It's a disservice to this committee and disrespect to this community to not show up when we ask you to come up. So
That's right.
we're going to address that, and Dante and I will take care of that on the side.
And might I add, if they come, it's going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. It feels like that, I mean, they all work really hard. I know they're dealing with a million things, but like, I don't want us all just like yelling at the kind person from DOT that they threw to us. Like, why don't we get like next meeting is an actual hour-and-a-half one-on-one conversation with Keith Bray about CB9's traffic safety, bike lane, bus lane, like everything, but get like, he calls the shots for Brooklyn, right? Like, could we get him to actually come and
his
maybe
team.
have a frank conversation
Yeah.
versus us just telling someone at DOT how frustrated we are with their bosses and then making them feel bad, and then they have to bring them back to their boss.
No, and I think it's a point well taken in the sense that, yeah, you know what, you have to go way higher, because the issues we're talking about go that much further. It's not about a liaison anymore. This is something systematically jacked up about the way they operate. And you know what, it's not something that a liaison can answer at this point. That's something that should come from a commissioner level. So that is Dante and I are going to talk about that, but I agree with you. I think that's a comment that is way past that. Yeah, somebody needs to speak to that who's senior.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that point. Okay, is there any new business for us to discuss at this time?
I just want to mention one terrible thing I saw related to you said before what kind of bike lanes work and don't work. On my block, I'm on Lincoln between Nostrand and Rogers. I didn't see it directly, but my wife just heard the crash sound and then called me out. She was with my daughter, but there is a bike lane on Lincoln, and there was a young boy. This was Monday or Tuesday. A young boy on a scooter, I think, from the Orthodox community coming towards the park, and he got doored really severely. She didn't see it, she just heard the sound, but I think the driver, the car was parked. Dooring is, when you open a door without looking at what might be there. I think it shows that, design matters. And even though there's a bike lane, and Lincoln on at least my block is a little bit wider than some of the others, yet still the swing of a door can hit somebody in the bike lane. It knocked this young kid off his scooter. She then took my daughter and they kept going. I stayed and waited for the ambulance to come. And then I haven't heard of a fatality, so I'm hoping he made it, but I was there, I watched him have a seizure. It was really bad. So I think when we're looking for improvements to the neighborhood, I think it's really important that we don't do these half-assed design solutions. Like, just paint on the ground does not really do anything. The car was not even moving at the time. The driver was getting out of the car. And I don't want to put him at fault other than he was not looking, I guess, as the door opened, but he certainly had no malintent. I do think he was a terrible human who didn't care that he hurt the kid, and then he just refused to give any information. So I hope the cops came and get him, because he was trying to then leave the scene of a crash. But still, any one of us could cause terrible harm to somebody else, even without, intending to. And I think sometimes the cops can't be there at all times, but a good design can really go a long way to make something that, two people bump into each other, but, is it the kid has a seizure or the kid just falls down and has a scrape? I think a design solution really could be life-changing. So whatever we get Keith Bray to come and talk to us about, I definitely will be pushing for as much buffered space, protected space, all that sort of stuff, because otherwise, if we didn't hear the crunch of that sound and If the driver wasn't pissed that his door doesn't close now, like this wasn't in the news, no one reported it, you know, these things happen a lot and can happen to anyone. So I want everyone to be safe out there, but I also want the designs to be better.
No, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And you're right. And that's the reason why I think, you know, we need to have a real good conversation about it. And again, just to think what works and what's going to take to keep everybody safe and all those issues, you know, all those concerns that we have. All right. Okay. So we've reached the end of the agenda. I want to thank everyone for joining this evening. So there are a number of follow-ups that are going to be happening. So you'll be getting a lot of things come through your email. There'll be some conversations Dante and I will have in terms of doing follow-ups with DOT and a couple of other stakeholders as well. But if you have any questions or any other feedback or follow-up on any of the items, oh, Jeff, I see you. Go ahead. What's up?
Yeah, I really, I know we're trying to get out, but I gotta follow up on what Paco just mentioned. And there were two quick other things that I was waiting to share.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The whole issue with Doring, and this is my observation as a person who's been operating a car for 50 years, is that we are now faced with a challenge as motorists to share the road, unfortunately, in a way that DMV has not taught most motorists to share the road, right? You ask the average driver if they might not even know what the term Doring means, right? We have bike lanes that are protected by parked cars, so that now there's a new challenge when you're making a turn that you have to look for a bike that was obstructed by parked cars. And guess who else needs to learn the new way to share the road? And I've been saying this, and I don't want it to be received as an attack on cyclists, but cyclists have to learn to share the road. And until DMV, DOT, New York State steps up to the bar and says, this is the problem, I don't care what we sit in this committee and get anybody to do. I don't care, like you said, all the painted lines, all the protected lanes, none of that's going to make a difference if we don't recognize that it is no longer just cars. When I got my license, it was just cars that they taught us to look out for. Look out for the other guy. That was the phrase back in the 70s, right? No, it's way more than that. And I'm gonna leave that alone, but it's something I think that we as a committee have to recognize, that education is going to get us out of this, right? The other thing is there was another horrific accident almost right outside the door of CB9, and this was caught on camera. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is, first, the sheer magnitude of it. I don't know if anybody saw it. It was either last night or the night before. A guy was coming down Nostrand. I think it was right at the corner of Nostrand and President, and a car headed west on President, ran right through a light, T-boned a car and sent it airborne. And the entire thing is caught on camera from the cameras that are in, what is that apartment complex across the street from the office there?
Carroll Gardens.
Carroll Gardens.
Carroll Gardens.
Thank God for grace and technology in cars. Nobody was killed that night. I don't know how the people are. 2 people were hospitalized. I mentioned that because that's another thing that nothing we sit here and speak about is going to fix, and that's reckless driving. The other thing that's significant is that there's a question as to whether or not the car that ran the light was being chased by the police, because within like 5 seconds, you could see it in the video, a police car comes up right behind this car that ran the light. So the news reporters were saying the police didn't say they were chasing this guy, but that's something to think about. And the last thing I'm going to say is, some of you received another article, yet another article from Jeff. And the reason why I'm sharing these articles from all over the world is that personally, I find it helpful when we read what cities in Europe, all over Europe, are facing in terms of dealing with the same challenges that we have right here. And the one I sent a few weeks ago was about what they're dealing with in Germany, and they're a little in front of us, and they're having a hard time, right? People are pushing back. Some of the merchants are saying they've lost 80% of their business when they implemented some of these car-free zones. So, you know, we gotta read, we gotta do research. We can't accept everything that some of these proponents of some of these changes are saying. And I think if we do, we'll be in a better position to negotiate the best solution for our community. That's all I got. If you didn't get the article and you want it, I think I sent it to you too, Fred. So if you have it,
Yeah,
you
go
know,
ahead.
if anybody wants it, you can take a look at it.
I say bravo, I concur.
I say great article, Jeff, because it gave both sides of the scale, not just for one point or the other, but the economic impact that it imposed on the businesses that were there to provide those services to the community and to the residents. Because it was bigger than just shutting down traffic. It was like, you're shutting down my
That's
livelihood
right.
now.
That's
Now, that's
right.
just one side. And then the other side was, yeah, this is great. You know, I can come down, because I think it was like the 15-minute city or something like that, that it was a
Yes.
good article. It was a
Yeah.
good article. And oh, and I just want to throw in here about turning the corner. I don't want to say the rumple strips, but it seems like there's something that I've noticed in a couple of cities. I want to say it might have been Connecticut and maybe in Long Island, when they have certain parts of the roundabout, the cars kind of have to slow down because it's like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So they just couldn't speed on certain corners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay, so with that, I think we have plenty of work on the table. Yeah, the next couple of months are gonna be, you know, I expect that we're gonna be really rocky. There's a lot to do, a lot of engagement we're gonna do, and I think we wanna start settling down in terms of some recommendations that we wanna make to some of the projects that are going on. I expect we're probably gonna hear a little bit more about Grand Army Plaza, so I think there might be some more information, hopefully, over the next few weeks, month or so, that we'll probably also have on that. So that'll be something that'll probably be popping up on the agenda shortly as well. But with that, I want to thank everyone for coming. There'll be a lot of communication going back and forth, so please just make sure you're checking your emails. And as always, please feel free to send anything to myself or to the office as well, if there's anything to share. Okay, so at this time, we've completed our agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Stanley Greenberg. Is there a second?
Second.
I second. Oh, that
I
was
have
Jeff. I
seconds
gave
and
it to
thirds and
Jeff.
fourths. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 I hear a
Aye.
majority. We stand adjourned.
Aye.
Time is now 8:53. Everyone, take care. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you,
Rest of your
everyone.
Take
evening.
care, everybody.
Everyone, stay
Okay, good
safe,
night.
stay
Have a
well.
great week. Super
Night.
week.